Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror. And today I have for you another upcoming books video, and this one is a doozy. I'm here to talk about all of the books that are coming out in the month of March. I'm gonna talk about thrillers and horrors, and I have in this list 43 books. 43. So grab your cup of coffee and let's start, you guys.
It's coffee time!
Let's kickstart the list with a horror thriller. We have The Memory Ward by John Bassoff. It is a novel about a man that is trying to discover what is real and what it isn't. They say it's always beautiful in Bethlehem, Nevada. It is a place where there is basically no crime. It is very safe. The people in the place are very friendly. So it looks like it's the perfect place to be. But a postal worker called Hank realizes that there's something wrong in this place, and he's determined to find out what's going on once he notices that the letters he is delivering are all blank. He's not the only one that has noticed that in this town things are a little bit weird. So he's gonna have to try to figure out what's going on, and I think that's when he's gonna go into a down spiral of investigation and trying to figure out what's real and what's not. The next one is a horror fantasy called The Divine Flesh by Drew Huff. Jennifer Plummer and the Divine Faith have exactly three things in common. They are trapped inside Jennifer's body, they despise each other, and they are in love with Daryl Plummer, who is Jennifer's ex-husband. Jennifer takes an experimental drug to get rid of the divine flesh that is inside of her, but that just makes things worse. I mean, it's an experimental drug, so sometimes there are consequences. Now we go to historical horror, and we have The Sleeping Land by Ella Alexander. Less than 2 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, 3 junior archaeologists and their advisor arrived to a remote cave in the Siberian wilderness, and they want to have the first extensive dig on Russian soil. When they start digging, they make some really exciting discoveries and everything seems to be going great, but the more that they dig and dig and dig, they start to get a little bit paranoid and think that they are not alone in that cave. We're moving now to YA horror fantasy, and we have When the Bones Sing by Jeannie Myers Sain. It is a new southern gothic supernatural thriller that follows a teen girl that lives in a town in Ozark and is able to hear the bones of the dead. More than a dozen people have disappeared in this small town, especially in the hiking trails. They go for a hike, they disappear, and they only find them already buried dead. 17-year-old Dovie doesn't really believe in magic, but she comes from a line of women that are able to hear the bones of the dead sing. And lately, especially since all of these people have gone missing, she hears the bones calling for her and they want her to help dig up their bodies. Next we have a mystery thriller called Don't Tell Me How to Die, and it is by Marshall Karp. Our main character had it all. She had a great husband, 2 kids, a fantastic career, but then at the age of 43, they told her that she was going to die before her next birthday. So she has approximately 3 months left to live. Her mother also passed away when she was 43, and she wants to avoid, all these women hunting her husband and becoming the next mother of her kids. So she wants in these 3 months to find basically her replacement. So she wants to make sure that the person that's going to be with her husband once she's gone is going to be a good mom to her kids. We go back to YA for another YA horror fantasy called They Bloom at Night by Trang Thang Tran. After a devastating hurricane, there is this red algae that has kind of started covering everything. But this place that it's called Mercy is known for having monsters that walk in plain sight, especially in a place that it's the core, and it's called The Cove. This is a very fantasy heavy horror story, so I think for this one you really need to love fantasy and monsters and be open for magic and all of that. I think this one might be a little bit too fantasy for me for what I can read from the synopsis, but it is also related related to the sea and sea creatures. So if that's something that you really enjoy, and I mean, this cover is stunning, so this one might be then for you. We're staying with YA, but this time we have a YA mystery thriller, and it is called We Were Warned by Chelsea Icasso. There was a murder at a beach resort, and now it has been abandoned after the murders happened, and nobody goes in there because, you know, rumor has it if you go there you might never come out alive. In fact, 2 high school students that dared to go inside were killed. And one night some teenagers decide to throw a party in this place because, you know, teenagers and their great ideas. And obviously in that party somebody else is going to die because, you know, you should just not go to places where people die. The next one is one that I'm really excited about and I have been anticipated. It is a horror dystopia and it is the new Agustina Basterrica book, and it is called Unworthy, and she's the author of Tenders of Flesh that I really enjoyed, so I am really excited for this. From a cell in a mysterious convent, a woman writes the story of her life, and she has to write it with whatever she can find, like dirt and blood. Like, it's not like she has pen and paper. She is a low member from this sisterhood in this, you know, convent, so she is deemed unworthy. And apparently while she is locked inside of this convent, the world outside is out of control. I think there's almost like an apocalypse going on. So I'm not really sure where this book is going to go with the story, to be fair, because that premise is a little bit open. But I'm excited. I want to give it a chance because, like I said, I really did enjoy Tenders of Flesh. So I want to see if it was like a one-time thing or if the author is somebody that's going to become one of my new favorites. Our next book is a horror thriller called The Thorns by Dawn Kurtajic. In this twisted tale, we have an author that reconnects with an old friend. And they start talking about their past, their secrets, and a creature that they thought was imaginary at the time. The next one is a fantasy horror historical fiction, and it is called Once Was Willem by M.R. Carey. This is the tale of Once Was Willem, who 1100 or something years after the death of Christ resurfaced in a kingdom that is now called England in order to fight an evil. This sounds like a very interesting one. It sounds like it might be a lot more historical than anything else, so you gotta be up for that. Our next book is a horror thriller called Vanishing Daughters by Cynthia Pelayo. It started the night that journalist Bree's mother died. After her passing, she realized that she started seeing like this woman in white and they were this weird noises, and she says, you know, it's probably just the grief. That's why I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things. It's just because my mom passed away. My mom used to believe in those things, and now I'm kind of, you know, due to my grief, I'm manifesting all of these things, but they are not actually real. But then she also learns that there is a serial killer on the loose where she lives, and she starts to realize that those ghosts, those voices, might be the victims from the serial killer trying to ask for help. Moving on to a YA horror that sounds like a lot of fun, and it is called How to Survive a Slasher by Justine Puthela Winans. Our main character's hometown, Satterville, is now called Slasherville because there have been two slashings and people have survived, and they are like the survivors of the slashers. And now there's like books about this place. It's popular, it's famous just because there has been a couple of slashers like you would see in horror movies. And I think this book is supposed to challenge the tropes of slashers, so I'm really excited. The next one is not particularly horror, but it is a middle grade sci-fi, and because I didn't have a middle grade horror to mention today, and this one is sci-fi, but it is sci-fi because it includes UFOs, it includes aliens, so I thought it kind of still has a little bit of horror in there. I wanted to mention this one, and it is called I Know What UFO Did Last Summer by Kevin Garone. We follow 12-year-old Marv, and when he sees something suspicious appearing in the sky, some sort of like craft, some sort of like ship, he is for certain, he is sure that aliens are upon us. He thinks that they have a plot to take over the world, and he also is ready and prepared. He knows how to defeat them, he knows how to avoid them. So I think this is gonna be a lot of fun, to be honest, and this is one that I would even read myself, even though it is pitched as, you know, sci-fi and not particularly horror. But being a middle grade, I think it's just going to be such a good time. And we have made it to the first short horror story compilation, and in this case they are all Gothic stories. It is called British Library Tales of the Weird Fear in the Blood. neighborhood, and it's called Tales from the Dark Lineages of the Weird by Mike Ashley, that is the editor of the stories. There are 18 stories that go through the dark and the occult, and these are all Gothic stories. I love the cover, and I think if you like Gothic fiction, this is one that you might want to pick up. It's going to be great for, you know, when spooky season comes around. Next we have more horror fantasy. I think there is more and more horror fantasy coming out, so I think it's going to be great for people that love fantasy books but also want to try a little bit of horror, and now they can do both at the same time without going full on just horror. And the next one is called He Burns by the River by Kalia Moreau. We are in 1963 and a kid falls ill, and everybody in town is starting to blame someone that they called the sorcerer, and they think, you know, they're blaming him for being like playing with the dark forces. However, that person that they call the sorcerer is just a man of science, you know, which is probably what would happen to you in this era. I am certain that if I would have lived in another time period, I might have been burned at the stake, considered a witch, and it is what it is. This is a story that takes place in 1963 Trinidad, and it is a story that explores colonialism, racism, and a lot of other things. And I think this is going to be very interesting because we have here a boy that falls ill, and it is a light-skinned boy, and so people in town turn against each other. Roran is the sick boy's older brother, and he seeks help on a priest, and the priest is known for being able to see, you know, the living and the dead. So he asks for help, and the priest tells him, you also have this talent, you can also see the dead and the living. So now Roran is gonna try to save his brother by communicating with the spirits. Now we go to adult mystery thriller, and we have a book called You Killed Me First by John Marrs. I know a lot of people have really enjoyed John Marrs's books. I've only read one so far, so I'm not an expert or anything, but if you have been catching up with his books, he has a new release. 3 women, 3 secrets, who will make it out alive. It's the 5th of November, and a woman just wakes up in the middle of a nightmare. She's gagged, she's strapped to a pole, and she's about to be engulfed in fire. How did she get there? We go back 11 months and we have Margot, who is, you know, a TV star whose fame has faded, and one of her best friends. They live in the same neighborhood, and somebody else new moves in, somebody called Lily, whose life seems to be perfect. And something happens, and now one of these 3 women is going to die. We're going back to horror historical fiction, and we have Rose of Jericho by Alex Grecian. This is a supernatural horror in which ghosts and ghouls are the least of a witch's problem in England. In this town, the dead are simply not dying. A woman that should have died from cancer is still alive, a boy that should have died in an accident is still alive, and a guy that was hanged is still alive and talking. So why aren't the dead dying? The next one is cosmic horror, which you guys know is not really my thing, but I know a lot of you love cosmic horror, so you have this new release coming. It's called Waste Ground by Mark Ruvolo. Henry is pushing 40, he's single, he's barely making ends meet, and his job is just delivering food, which is also not great, and then disaster strikes, as if it was not enough. His car has been stolen and he's determined to get it back. And in search of this car, he's going to end up in some sort of like wasteland. So I'm guessing here's where the cosmic horror thing is going to happen, and it's going to get a little bit weird. And now let's talk about another short horror story compilation, but this time they are all by the same author, and it is called Memento Mori, 13 Tales of Horror by Kayla Frederick. Death can come for anybody at any time, there is just no escaping it. What starts as a peaceful day ends up in the worst way sometimes. This book is basically a compilation of short stories that are there to remind you that one day you too are going to die. Very, very cheerful compilation. Next we have a mystery gothic tale, and it is called Chloe by Connie Briscoe. This is supposed to be a story for people that like Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, so it's going to be a little bit gothic as well. This is a domestic suspense, and it is all centered around a woman that has married a rich black man, only to discover that he remains haunted by his late deceased wife. And his first wife, the one that, you know, is no longer with us, she committed suicide. Or did she? So it is a beautiful mansion that she's living in now with her new billionaire husband, but that place is haunted by the first wife. The next one is a very interesting one because it is YA poetry, and it is called The House No One Sees by Adina King. This one sounds very interesting because it follows a 17-year-old girl that receives a text from her estranged mother, and that kind of forces her to go through her childhood home and the hallways and kind of relive and experience everything. This is a very dark one. It's not particularly horror, but I wanted to mention it here because there are not too many YA poetries, and the story sounds very, very dark. So even though it's not horror, it does have a dark theme. Her mom has an addiction, or used to have an addiction, so she's confronted with all of that, and as she's walking through this house, she will find herself almost trapped inside, and we don't know if she's gonna be able to make it out of here alive. Now we go back to adult horror, and we have Night of the Witch Hunter by Patrick Barb. We are in 1999, so we are approaching the new millennium, and we have an outcast teenager that kind of creates a work for school. It is a video project, and unwillingly, with that technology that he uses, he wakes up, brings back to life a witch hunter from the 1600s. The next one is also an adult horror, but it is an Indigenous adult horror called Passing Through a Prairie Country by Dennis E. Staples. For decades, a really dark force has cursed this specific reservation, and now that kind of ghost dark force has settled into a casino, and that means that people now don't want to go there because if there is a ghost, a dark presence, they don't want to go there, and that is affecting their income. Meanwhile, we have a documentarian that is trying to figure out what's going on in this town, what's going on in this casino, why are people being hunted by this thing that somebody calls also the Sandman. So I think this is going to be very interesting, and it has dark humor in it as well. So if you love dark humor and you're interested in this story, this might be one for you. Now we're going back to YA, and we have YA horror vampires. The next book is called Till Death by Kellen McDaniel. Howard is just trying to pass time until he can actually make it to college because people have been telling him that college is much better, and he's hoping to find the man of his dreams once he gets to college. However, then he meets George. George reminds him of the movie stars from the 1960s that he is completely obsessed with. And George, you know, he's very endearing. His fashion is a little bit of like grandpa fashion, and he starts to get a crush on him. So I'm guessing these two very unlikely guys are going to meet and maybe fall in love with each other. So I don't know if this one is going to have a little bit of romance in it as well, but anything with vampires, I'm in. And we have another vampire book coming. This is a horror book with vampires, but also a historical horror. So we have The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. And now I promised myself I was not going to read any more Stephen Graham Jones books because I've read 3 and I have not loved any of the 3. I think I have a problem connecting with his writing style, even though I appreciate a lot of his themes and stories and doing something different. And now he comes out with a book about vampires, and I am so tempted, but I think I need to really let go because I don't think it's going to be for me purely based on the writing style. A diary written in 1912 by a pastor is recovered from inside of a wall. It unveils a massacre that occurred and the events that led to those massacres. This is an American Indian revenge story, so I am expecting this to be great for people that love his other books, but like I said, I don't think it's going to be for me. We now go back to mystery thriller, and we have The 10 Worst People in New York by Matthew Plass. This feels a little bit personal. This title feels personal. The 10 worst people in New York are dying, one after each other. There is a late night TV show that talks about the 10 worst people of New York. And now one of them, I think number 10 on the list, jumps to his death, and everybody's shocked. So it appears that either the 10 people that are in this, worst people list are either killing themselves, or somebody is making it look like accidents and it's killing them off one by one. The next one is not horror, but it is a book that I have been anticipating. However, I am remaining calm about this, and it is the new Hunger Games book. So it is a YA dystopian, and it is called Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, and it is the Hunger Games 0.5. So after reading the Ballad of Songbird and Snakes and really not liking it at all, I bought it hardcover, got rid of it immediately after reading it. It was boring, not for me. So I'm a little bit skeptical going into this one, not gonna lie. For me, the original trilogy is where it's at. However, this one does follow a character that I really enjoy, and I am willing to give it a chance. It is the 50th annual Hunger Games, and to celebrate the 50th anniversary, there's going to be basically a double offering. So 2 guys and 2 girls from each district are going to participate in the Hunger Games. And one of them is going to be in District 12, and that is Haymitch. I really like the character of Haymitch, and I'm really excited to read his story. But like I said, I'm keeping it, I'm trying not to hype it up too much because I was already burned before. Moving on to a horror mystery thriller that looks very good. It's called The Haunting of Room 904 by Erica T. Worth. This is a story about a woman that uses her very unique talent to figure out what happened to her sister because her sister has been killed. Olivia has now received a talent. It was never meant for her, it was meant for her sister. Her sister was able to, see and talk to the dead, but now her sister is dead. And Olivia has somehow inherited that power. Because her sister died in very kind of weird circumstances, Olivia is determined to use a talent that she now has, that she now possesses, to try to figure out what actually happened to her sister and why and how did she die. Next, we have another adult horror mystery thriller. It is called Serial Killer Support Group, and it is by Saratoga Sheffer. When Sarah's younger sister is murdered by a serial killer and the police is unable to find that person and bring them to justice, she decides that it is time for her to take matters into her own hands. So the way that she's going to go about this is she's going to join a serial killer support group and talking to the people that are other serial killers. She's going to pretend to be one, and she's gonna have to try to figure out what happened to her sister who actually killed her. Obviously, it's dangerous to do this. I mean, it's a good plan, but it is a dangerous plan. But I'm really excited about this one because you guys know I love everything that's kind of like true crime related and serial killers. The next one is a fantasy book, so I didn't know if I wanted to mention it, but it is a fantasy book with witches, and I know a lot of you love witches, so I thought I would include it here. It is called The Bane Witch, and it is by Ava Morgan. The book is pitched as a mix between practical magic and Gone Girl, so there seems to be a little bit of a thrilling aspect to it. The story is about a woman that not only is she a witch, she's also a hunter. Pierce Corbin has always loved poisonous things, not just plants, also men. Pierce ends up faking her own death to escape a bad marriage, and after she faked her own death with poison, obviously because she's the master of poison, she goes to live with her aunt. And she will learn that she comes from a lineage of witches that are called the Bane witches because they are able to ingest poison and then use magic to their advantage. Moving on to an adult horror thriller, we have White Line Fever by Casey Jones. It's a book about friendship, about trauma, and about how to take the wheel on your own life. There is a road that seems to be a very normal road, but a lot of people are calling it the Devil's Driveway. Livia and her longtime friends decide to take that road as a shortcut. They just wanted, a much needed weekend getaway, but as soon as they enter the road, even though the road is not even that long, every turn, everything you do in that road is dangerous. Our next book is a horror gothic mystery, and it is called Gothic Town by Emily Carpenter. Billy has received an email that she's very shocked about and very happy about at the same time. In the midst of the pandemic, they want to promote people moving into certain towns. So she receives an email that says she can have this beautiful Victorian house for only $100. So I don't know if I will believe these. I don't know, because okay, if it's to boost the economy and all of that, but honestly, if it's too good to be true, I always say it, but then it probably is. They are promised, this new life here, so she moves there with her family and she's hoping for a fresh start. But in this southern town, it's supposed to be, very hospitable and everybody's supposed to be really nice. But there is something really, really wrong in this place. I mean, if they want to sell you a home there for $100, probably it's because there's something really evil in it. And we're gonna go back to vampires because our next book is an adult horror gothic with vampires. It is called Blood on Her Tongue by Johanna van Veen. This is a Dutch author, so we are in the Netherlands in 1887, and Lucy's twin sister Sarah is very sick. She refuses to eat, she mumbles nonsensically, and the doctors don't know what's going on with her, but they just say she's insane. They declare insanity. Lucy wants to protect her twin sister Sarah, ending up in an asylum, so she's trying to figure out what's wrong with her, why is she acting this way, and why is she obsessed with a corpse that was discovered not long ago. And very, very soon, Sarah is going to be very, very hungry. The next release in the month of March, it's called The Way We Used to Walk, and it is by Megan Egelhart and Mark Beale. 15 years ago, 6 college housemates, they kind of accidentally opened, a door to another dimension, and monsters started to come into our own world. They managed to close it, but for a very high price. Now they are adults, and they realize that those monsters that they had banished are back. The next book in the list is a horror thriller. It is called Nowhere by Alison Gunn. After losing her young son in an accident, Rachel decides to focus all her energy into becoming, a politician, and she uses that as kind of a way to avoid her grief. So not the best, but she focuses the energy on that. Meanwhile, her husband, it is a author that basically never gets jobs anymore. Finn has issues with alcohol, which is potentially what caused the death, the accident in which the young son died, and he is a author that nobody hires anymore, so he's going through it. And the only thing that is tying Rachel and Finn together is their 2 daughters that they still have that are alive. And in this hometown where they live, there is going to be something evil in the woods calling the children to the woods, and obviously once they go in, they don't come out again. So the series of disappearances is making life in this town very hard. So this one has some folklore horror to it, so if that's something that you love, this might be for you. Staying on the adult horror books, we have Wrecked by Alex Gonzalez. This is a disturbing examination of toxic masculinity. Sammy and his girl were going to have a really good life together, but then an accident changed everything. After the accident, Sammy went into kind of like a downward spiral on the internet, watching really gory videos and things like that that used to really terrify him before. He goes basically to the dark web, where I think you can see videos of people's accidents and people dying for real, which is very disturbing, so keep that in mind if you want to check out this book. Our next book is called Unholy by J.V. Gax. Magdalena, a 48-year-old woman, has 48 hours to stop the apocalypse. So Magdalena recruits Anna, and they both together decide to infiltrate into a cult group that is supposed to bring back to life the Antichrist. So Magdalena's faith is going to be put to the test. She's also going to question God and why God allows for young people to die, like an 8-year-old girl, all of that. So I think this is going to be very interesting because it's going to have horror in it, but I guess it's also going to be a religious horror in a way, because we're going to touch things like religion and belief, and how can you believe in a God that allows bad things to happen. They're also trying to stop the birth of the Antichrist, so it's going to be interesting. The next horror book for adults is called Nameless Things by Ernest Jensen. In the aftermath of a painful breakup, Mike and his best friend decide to go to a national park kind of thing to spend there a couple of days, relax, move on, process the information, but then a meteor strikes. And the meteor ends up trapping them together with other campers in a secluded place, and that's where the story starts. A place that they thought it was going to be a sanctuary, that they were going to be safe, and they're going to have just a nice weekend getaway or something. Now it's turned into their own deathbed because there's something coming for them. And we are still staying with adult horror books. The next one is called Empty Devils by Chris DeLeo. With his daughter in a casket and his wife in a cult, our main character is about to lose his mind. And David thinks he's definitely lost it now when he is able to talk to his deceased daughter's ghost. But David also wants revenge on whoever killed his child, and so he's going to use that to his advantage. Sometimes it takes a monster to defeat another monster. And yes, we are still staying with adult horror books, and the next one is called Root Rot by Saskia Nislow. 9 children travel with their families to the grandfather's estate. This is a place where strange things start to happen. We have mushrooms that ooze blood. People's faces don't hang right anymore. So the children are unable to process anymore like real time and space. This seems to be a lot more into the weird / cosmic section of horror, even though it didn't say so when I was doing my research. But based on the synopsis, I think this is going to be more fantastical, more cosmic than irregular horror. We're staying, yes, with adult horror, and we have the new Alan Shivers book, and it is called Killer Vocals. He is well known for slashers, and he is staying on his element because this is another slasher. We have Greek sisters that are really excited because they have made it to the auditions to be part of this new girl band. The last stage of this casting takes place in a beautiful mansion, and they are thrilled. 6 girls are there to battle up to the end to get the spot on the group, but then a serial killer arrives to kill the mood. And last but not least, we're gonna finish it with horror with vampires. Vampires is something we love, so I'm glad to finish this list off with vampires. And the book is called Bloodstains by Gaslight, and it is a book by Red Lago. We are in 1997, and we follow an astronomy student called Reese, and she's ready to shoot for the stars, but there's one thing holding her back, and that is her jealous boyfriend. He's getting more manipulative, he's getting more obsessed with her, controlling, so I would say just dump the guy, bye-bye, see you never. So Reese has actually decided to end things with him, and before she gets the courage to actually tell him face to face, Michael is in a really bad car accident, and when he recovers, he's changed. He doesn't seem to be the same person anymore. This one does talk about partner violence, so keep that in mind if that is a content warning that you cannot read about. So just keep that in mind if you wanted to read this one. So that was everything, you guys. I've been sitting here for like an hour and 20 minutes at this point, so it is crazy. We had a very long list. I hope that you found something in this list that you are very excited about, maybe something that you didn't know it was going to be released and it is exactly your cup of tea. Let me know down below also if there is other horrors or thrillers that I didn't talk about that are coming out in March. Leave it in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you guys as always so much for all your support, and I hope to see you all in our next coffee time. Bye.